Good? All right. Well, thanks for coming. I'm Julie. Before we start, I wanna share with you that this is one of my first talks ever. So I'm a bit stressed, and I hope that what I'm going to share with you is going to be of interest. How I arrived here is I know Fabien since university and high school, and I met him at a barbecue in summer, and he explained to me that they wanted to expand the type of talks during the Odoo experience this year, and he asked me, do you want to do a talk? I said, yeah, sure. I'm not sure whether what I have to tell will interest anyone, but yes, sure. Let's try it out. So bear with me. I will really appreciate your feedback at the end of this session. So who am I? I'm Julie. What do? I help big companies change their outdated way of working and thinking and transition towards more collaborative and participative types of organizations. I'm here today because I want to share with you my story, and I also want to share 5 tips and tricks that I've learned so far, and I think are important to know for going forward, especially for people who wants to be more efficient in selling and building trustful relationship with the customers. But before we start, I would like to know who is in the room, because I have no idea who's here. So I want to invite you to pick up your phone. I don't know whether you know Slido. Pick up your phone. Join us on slido.com. Enter the code RT0310. And I would like to know, what are your expectations? Who is in the room today? What are your expectations for today in one word? Who are you? And what profession do you have? I think it's one of my key principles is to build solutions together with the customer, bring customers in when you develop solutions. I didn't have the chance to get in touch with any of you before this talk, so I'm wondering who you are and what are your expectations for today? Hi, Joanna. Hi, Marcel. All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. I've always worked in standard hierarchical organizations that you could consider like machines, where humans are considered as resources, where decisions are being taken by a few few numbers of people at top of a pyramid, and where senior leaders think that to adapt to the increasing volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity of this world, the solution is always to go faster. I started my career as well, first of all, I studied in management sciences here in Louvain-la-Neuve, and after my studies, I decided to go to London. My first job was door-to-door sales, selling mobile telephone contracts to people, trying to convert British Telecom customers in London towards Carphone Warehouse customers. After that, I got hired by the recruitment company. I decided I wanted to go back to marketing. I got hired by the recruitment company that was trying to place me, and I became a recruitment consultant. My job was to sell people to companies that were in need of skills. I was a middleman. My job was to have the biggest margin possible between what the company would be able to pay or would be willing to pay, and lower as possible what a person would be able to earn to do the job. After 3 years, I came back to Belgium, and I started to work as an account manager in a IT consultancy company. My job was to sell CVs to the European Commission for large projects. My job was to change people's CVs so that their profile would fit with what organization would need in order to deliver the projects. Those first jobs were totally not aligned with my values. At that time, I decided to quit that job, and I started working. I had the chance to be hired by a large bank, and I entered that bank as a recruitment consultant. I knew when I entered that company that my goal was to leave recruitment behind and evolve and grow towards a more strategic role within the organization. I got hired by the Human Resources Department. I worked as a IT recruiter for 2 years, and then an opportunity arose. I got the chance to become business manager for the recruitment department, and my first role was to be end-to-end responsible for the recruitment process. That's where I got in touch with Lean Six Sigma and operational excellence. My job was to redesign the entire recruitment process in such a way that we could hire faster, better fitted people. And at that time, I was still convinced that to be better and faster and stronger, it was all a matter of process. It was all a matter of optimization. And I was still thinking at that time that if the process was not working, it's because people was not working hard enough. And I was good at it. I was the fixer. I was the type of person in the HR organization where when there was a complex challenge that everyone thought was impossible to solve, they would come to me. I was like, yeah, I'm on it. I'll fix it. I worked a lot on my own, developing solutions on my own, optimizing processes on my own, and starting to ask myself why the results that I had foreseen on paper were not sustainable on the long term. But my company liked the way I was working. I was a project manager, and on paper everything looked fine, and in any case, who cares about whether the intent of impact lasts, right? So my scope became bigger and bigger, and that's where when I started my journey into leadership. My scope became bigger and bigger, and it became clear for me that I started to struggle because I couldn't do anything by my own anymore. I was that close to going to burnout because the score was becoming bigger, so what was I doing? I was working harder, sleeping less, sacrificing my private life. That's what I thought was the way forward. Until, as I said, I was that close to burnout, and I went onto a personal development journey with a career coach, and that's when I realized that if I want to scale up my abilities, I need to learn to work through others. And that's when I went into coaching and helping teams develop and learn the skills that I knew so that they could deliver and optimize their own way of working themselves. I got in touch with Lean, continuous improvement, and I managed successful projects that had sustainable, lasting impact, just because I learned that if you want to have sustainable impact, you need to work with the team and involve the team that are in the process and doing the work themselves in defining the solution and developing the solutions. Then the VUCA world hit the company, the organization I was working with. Well, it was already hitting them for quite some time, I guess. And at that time, they realized that if they wanted to be sustainable and survive in this world, they needed to change the entire way they were doing work, the entire way their work processes were organized, the entire way the delivery of products and values was delivered. And they decided to go agile. Who knows agile? Yeah, I figured. That's agile, as defined at the time, was bringing the decision level, the power of decision lower to where the work is, working to shorter iterative sales cycle, bringing the customer in, all great concepts, but only very much oriented towards process. But at the time, it really, really made sense for me. I was like, this is what we need. This is how we're going to accelerate value delivery to the customer. We're just going to shorten the delivery process and implement agile. In that project, working for the human resources department, I got put in charge of the employee guidance program, because unfortunately in that company I was working for, one of the objectives of the agile transformation at the time was to reduce the number of employees in the company. I got put in charge at that time of the redesign of the offboarding process of companies. My mission at the time was to redesign a process in such a way that it could absorb large number of people, and while ensuring that when they would leave the company, they would still remain ambassador of the brand. That was a challenge. I did the best I could, but that's when a big penny dropped in my mind. I got in touch with a lot of people in the organization. I was already aware at that time that it was important to design processes and services that are in line with your customers' needs. So I got in touch with a lot of people in the company that were still working at ING, and I got hit with an awful truth at that time. The awful truth is that I faced people that were highly anxious and stressed of losing a job they didn't even like. And I was like, no, that can't be it. There's something wrong. There's something wrong in the way organizations manage their business. They are all craving for acquiring new customers, retaining customers, reducing churn. How is it possible that companies think that they can gain and maintain the trust of their customers if they don't even invest in having sustainable people plan, and they don't even invest in their people and in internal processes that are in respect for people. So I decided to leave. That was the moment where I decided to leave ING and to set up my own company. I founded last year my own company called Reshape Trust. Why? Because I believe that for companies to gain and maintain the trust of their customers, they first need to invest in reshaping the trust their own collaborators have for the brand, and it all starts by reshaping the trust that individuals have for themselves and their ability to deliver value. That was my new mission. Since then, every day I wake up, and that's what I aim to change and bring to the world. How to do that? I have no idea. Being here today is one of those actions I think that can help reshape trust in the world of work. I hope I will inspire you with this, and that you will already start yourself thinking of how to develop your own business process, how to approach your own customer relationships in a trustful way. But that is only a little part that I can do. Another thing that I'm doing now is that I am helping a new company transition to a new agile way of working, but also agile way of being. So I'm specialized in agile transformation, but I only work with companies that realize that it's not only about doing agile, it's also about being agile. I only work with companies that are where the leaders are ready to go first, and where the leaders realize that investing in a mindset shift in the entire organization is what will enable them to be successful. So I'm working at the moment with a telecom company. I think we just started that agile journey. Maybe you will hear from it. I do believe that there is a real possibility for them to have a successful transformation, because they are investing a lot in people, in building trust within people, in creating self-organizing and autonomous team, helping people taking decisions and empowering people to take decisions. So now with regards to my 5 tips and tricks. It's very easy, and that's one of the first things that I bring to companies, and I want to bring that to you. I didn't invent it. I just think it's so brilliant and so simple that I thought I would share it with you. How to sell. Don't sell. Usually in sales, we use a lot of words and we teach people to push, how to persuade, how to tell a story. You need to stop doing that. Start co-creating with your customers. Start to listen to your customers. It's not about selling a product. It's about listening to someone or an organization having a problem and finding a solution together. So stop pushing, start pulling, putting options out there so that the customer can pull solutions that are adapted to their needs. Stop trying to persuade that a product is good and the best. Start inspiring them with success stories. Stop selling. Start listening. And listening, I learned that from a training I went to last year. Listening is not only not talking. Listening is also not thinking about what you're going to say. Start listening to your customer's problem. Deep dive, take time to identify what the problem is, and co-create the solution together. Invite them to go better, invite them to go to build solutions and to solve the problem in a way that is going to be sustainable and in contribution to a better world. Thank you. I'd like to have time for questions and answers. Does anyone has a question that something, a comment, something that they would like to share? Any questions? Yes? Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to rephrase what you are saying in my words. If I understand properly, your organization is organized in what I would call silos, where the roles are, the teams are clustered by roles, and to deliver value, take a decision, then it needs to go via several teams, and you struggle to have consensus and to collaborate with each other to solve customer problems. Is that, well, that is one of the principles that we implement in, indeed, in the organization I work with. It is a typical problem of standards organization, where standard classical organization are indeed organized in silos per function. And the big shift that I advise to do is to build cross-functional and multidisciplinary teams. So the way what we bring to organizations and the way we help organizations organize themselves is by value stream, by value chain delivery, forming teams of sales, marketing, business, development, testing, and operations, multidisciplinary team that are end-to-end responsible for the delivery of a piece of value, so that they are all together, all the roles and functions that are necessary to deliver a piece of value to a customer work closely together in such a way that collaboration and people interaction gets facilitated, and the answer to a customer problem or a issue in delivery can be solved directly by the team. And that's what I would advise to go to. It's one of the big principles of the agile way of working that we're implementing. Break the silos, bring people together, make them empowered to take decision, empower them of being end-to-end responsible of a piece of value, and trust them that they have the knowledge and the skills and the desire to serve the customer in the best way. Does it answer your question? Thank you. Another question? Yes?
Did you face some problem between the expectation of the management and the expectation of the new employee, especially via that organization?
Yes, a lot. the biggest challenge, and that's the biggest lessons, also a big lessons learned I can share with you, is that for a successful transformation to be successful, the leaders need to go first. It's very important that any transformation is sponsored by the senior leaders of the organization, and that they agree to go first and change themselves first. Because in such transformation, I think an agile way of working is more naturally in line with the Y and millennial generations. The biggest challenge of an organization is for X generation to change their way of thinking and agree that this world and the way organizations work and deliver work needs to change, meaning that they need to change themselves, agree that to get away from command and control and grow towards servant leadership. And that is the biggest challenge in any organization, is for X generation, older generation, to make the switch, because we are all brainwashed through our education in thinking that business works in a certain way, but the world is changing. I'm sorry, apparently we are out of time, but I'm happy to discuss afterwards. Thank you so much.
Yes. Hi everyone. Oof. Can you hear me? Right. All right. My name is Bastien. I'm 33 years old. I live in Brussels. Well, I've worked pretty much 10 years in, let's say, the digital industry. I started in marketing advertising. I worked for 2 years at Deloitte Digital, working in large transformation program, and by the way, at ENG for agile transformation programs. And then I moved in a pharma firm as a head of digital, working on large digital transformation program and a lot of innovation. Then 2 years ago, when I turned 30, I basically wanted to bring more purpose, more meaningful in my career, and I launched my own company. First, it was startup incubator called Sherify, focusing on social entrepreneurs. Then I launched Citizen Fund, which is an impact investment fund. And very recently, 2 years ago actually, we created Impact Valley, which is an innovation agency working on sustainable development. So pretty much kind of small ecosystem focusing on sustainable development. Today we are at Impact Valley, we are 6 in the team. We work as a kind of consultant, but really focusing on impact-driven innovation. So we've facilitated like 50 innovation programs for very small and quite large companies, as you can see. And well, as you may imagine, working on innovation and more sustainable innovation, we work closely with CSR, corporate social responsibility champions, and innovation leaders. And looking at that, I've been asking myself, what am I going to talk also today? And one of the key things I would like to address is the fact that for us, corporate social responsibility will be a kind of path to a new innovation model, a new innovation paradigm. And that's what I'm going to talk today. I split it, this topic into 3 main sections. First, asking ourselves why CSR is actually and will be much more than a buzzword in the corporate environment. How this societal transition that we all need to do, basically, can be embraced like a digital transformation, and I'll do the mapping between my experience before and what I'm doing now. And finally, what are the concrete action that you can take? If you have any questions, please shoot. Let's make it interactive anyway. I don't know how long it's going to take because first time I delivered a presentation as well. But let's say that if we have some time after, we can also have some questions. So first, why CSR will be more than a buzzword? Well, first, do you know what CSR is? Because a lot of people don't know. Yes? You know, all right. Well, CSR, so social responsibility in the corporate environment, it's pretty much how they manage the business process to reduce the negative externalities on the environment, or how they can even produce a positive impact on the society. It goes on the ecological footprint, all the social activities, ethics, sustainable development, so basically everything related to the impact on the planet, and we know how important it is today. Well, CSR has evolved a lot, and I like to do the comparison with the web. You know, the web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. It has evolved a lot, and CSR, it's a bit like that. I'm going to explain you how. So you remember maybe the version 1.0 when you have like passive users? Well, basically, as we all know, CSR for quite a long time has been translated into fund and financial support. A lot of companies simply choose NGOs related or not to the core business, and they provide some finance, they give some funding. And it's actually very important because giving finance to NGOs and other social initiatives is very important because it helps them to access new level of growth, new services like marketing campaigns or big communication campaigns that help them to reach new donators, for example. So giving them money is very important. And it also helps to close the gap between the huge capital in the private sector and the very limited resources in the NGOs environment. So it's very important to do that. But that's a bit, like we say at Impact Valley, the 1.0 version. We see more and more an evolution going from the 1.0 to a 2.0, where users are more active, participative, like the web. Basically, in a company, you can also engage more and more your employees into those kind of actions. And what we see is that not only financial resources, but they give human resources and even physical resources. We call that skills-based sponsorship program, and not only finance sponsorship program. So it's actually enable every companies to send the employees, the talents, to give some time and invest time in social initiatives. We see that more and more, sending some talents, sending also some physical material to help NGOs accelerate their developments. And it's actually very fashion today, because a lot of people in a company, and mostly the younger generation, are looking for purpose-driven initiative as much as business learning opportunities. So it's very important to bring them, because it helps to create an engagement culture and to have a lot of committed talents. A third version is when you have interactive users. And that's a bit what we try to do at Impact Valley. You know, when you look at the Web 3.0, it actually brings even more intelligence into the systems. That's a bit the idea. Well, that's pretty much the same thing. After leveraging the financial resources, the human resources, the physical resources of company, what they can do is actually leverage the know-how. Big companies have acquired a lot of know-how, a lot of expertise, and employees, more than giving some time painting the walls or growing some vegetables, or whatever, like we see, which is still good, we see more and more employees providing their business competencies, their technology knowledge, creative skills, and working with the NGOs, with social innovators, social entrepreneurs, to co-create new solutions. That's a bit what we say, like the 3.0 version. The good thing with that, the good thing with collective intelligence, it's on the one hand that, as I mentioned, it helps to have very much committed talents. Why? Because they will actually develop new skills and knowledge as well. They give the skills, they give the competencies, but by working closely with those social innovators, they actually learn a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of innovation methodologies, because they need to build new innovative solutions. And they can very much value the experience, because it has a lot of impact on the organization. So in terms of engagement, it is very good. On the other side, for the social organizations, well, it has a lot of impact, because it accelerates the innovation process. I will give some example later. And it helps to have a very strong relationship with the corporate organization, more than just a fund raising some money. They actually build a very strong relationship with those corporate organizations, because the talents who have invested sometimes in collective intelligence programs with them continue to invest time. We see a lot of clients who still invest time in NGOs, working closely with them. And I'll share some example as well. Looking at that, well, the evolution of CSR, we see that it changed a bit in large corporate organization. CSR, for a very long time, was related to communication department, marketing communication. Since, as you can see, it engaged employees, it helps them in terms of personal development, we see that CSR is shifting more and more to HR department. And now it's very much related to both. We do believe, and we talk about that also, that it should be part of innovation. And it will be part of innovation according to us. Why? Because when they work with social innovators, with social change makers, they actually learn a lot from them. Because the beautiful thing with change makers is that they they have the ability to identify the most pressing social challenges on Earth and address them with a sustainable solutions. And that can be very inspiring for large corporate organizations. They can get inspiration from them, and together they can co-create new solutions that can generate a good return on investment in terms of innovation for the companies. And that's why we believe that CSR will pretty much more and more going into the global business strategy of large companies. That's a bit why CSR will evolve. We think that it will be a very important subject in the coming months, for sure, in years. The question is, how can you do that as a company? How the social transition, the societal transition can be embraced like a digital transformation. And that's a bit where I'm going to try to bridge the gap between my past experience in digital transformation and what we see now for 2 years at Impact Valley with all the corporate organization. Maybe you remember that slide from Deloitte. I think it's quite interesting to see that in terms of digital disruption, every company needs to jump on the digital transformation journey, as you can see. Depending on industries, it goes step by step. There are industries that goes very much faster than other one, and it's funny to see that actually in terms of social transition, it's pretty much the same thing. Companies on the below right corner, well, they will actually take more time, longer fuse, but big bang, there will be a big impact in terms of social transition as well. And that's why I'm actually trying to do the mapping between a societal transition and a digital transformation. And as you will see, the way we do that will be the same. When we do a digital transformation in a company, we do the same way with a social transition. How? Well, looking at digital transformation journey, another slide from another consulting firm, is the fact that you start as a beginner and you ideally go until what is called a digerati. You have two axes, digital intensity, transformation management intensity. So basically the fashionistas are the companies that will be the first one to create new mobile app, a lot of digital application because it's fashion and they do a lot of things, but it doesn't drive a lot of value. Transformation management, they will invest a lot in change management, in process, everything going in terms of agile, and then launching first new digital solutions. The best one are the digerati. They drive value through the digital transformation journey. They invest in new agile ways of working, they have a big vision, a new culture, and they invest in digital talents. Looking at that, I try to do the mapping with CSR. And it's actually funny to see that it's pretty much the same thing. You have beginners, you have the fashionistas, you know, the one who do more like kind of greenwashing, who invest a lot in communication. Then you have the conservatives that actually invest much more in change management, try to understand how they can act on the social transition. And then you have not the digerati, but what we like to call the change maker, the one who really lead change. And as I mentioned before, going on a fashionistas way is more working on the image, on your corporate image, and that's why it's very much related to communication. Working on change management or transformation management will be more on corporate engagement, will be more very much related to HR. And depending on, well, the path you take, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, well, it will be more related to communication, image, or more on people engagement. The 3.0, as you can see, is straight to the top right corner, where you actually become a change maker, a social innovator. And the way we do that, the way we've done that with some organization, it's a bit like the digital transformation. We work with a champions model. We identify people from the CSR department, innovation department, who want to engage into the social transition. We help them to foster a collective intelligence culture. new ways of working, and at the end to come with new innovative solution through an open innovation journey. Just to give you a few examples, it's like every time in innovation, a lot of companies do innovation challenge. They connect with the innovation communities, they have incubator, accelerator, or they even have a kind of innovation ecosystems. They work on external impact or internal impact. And that's a bit how we see the evolution of social transition and digital transformation at the same time. That was a bit the how, like asking ourselves how companies can embrace the social transition just like they do, or they did, or they are doing in the digital transformation. We've done that with some companies, and I will try to explain a bit what are the concrete action that we took and that you can potentially take. So, when doing large organizational transformation program, we go from vision to action or from vision to impact. You need to define your vision and your strategy. You need to work on the culture. You need to have the right competencies to finally have concrete action at the end, and then impact that you should measure. And all along the journey, you have the leaderships that needs to remain at the top. And that's a bit like digital. It was the same thing when I've done that at Deloitte Digital or AbbVie or whatever. Well, you first need to have the buy-in of the top management. You need to make sure that you have the right vision, and then you start your transformation. What we see in the social transition is a bit like the digital transformation again, is that at the very beginning, they first need to get inspired to actually work on the culture. Even before defining, shaping a vision, they need to get some inspiration. They need some awareness. And I like to take the safari one because I remember a few years ago when every company did like a safari on tech startup incubators just to understand how they work and get inspiration. Well, we see the same thing now. A lot of companies try to get inspired by change makers, but people who are really working on new circular economic models, on new biodiversity subject. And that's the very first thing that companies do. They get inspired, they work with the NGOs, they work with social innovators, and they understand how those guys are actually addressing the most pressing challenges. As a next step, and I hope you know about it, they need to define the vision and strategy, and the way they do that is by embedding the Sustainable Development Goals framework. So the United Nations have defined 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that we all need on the planet to achieve by 2030. Behind those 17 goals, there are 169 targets, KPI, that you can actually embed into your own strategy. Today there are 400 companies who have signed for the SDGs in Belgium, so I hope you will. If it's not the case, they choose the different goals and KPI that are very much related to their business, to their negative externalities, to see how they can actually act on the social transition, and they define the vision and the strategy. And well, sometimes we help them to do that. In most of the case, we play a role on the next stage, which is working on competencies. The way we do that, and just like we did with the digital transformation, is to make sure that once you have the vision and the strategy, and you create the culture, it needs to be bottom-up. You need to work with your employees in a bottom-up approach, making sure that all people, whatever the level, can come with new ideas. They all, in most of the case, a lot of citizens are engaged in the social transition. So among your companies, you must have a lot of people willing to be part of the social transition and part of the CSR initiatives. So the working on the competencies, the way we do that is to help them create a collective intelligence spirit, approach, methodologies, and making sure that people can go through, well, that's our own methodologies. We make it very simple: discover, design, define, develop, inspired by design thinking, lean startup, but very simple to use. What they do is that they discover the business opportunities behind the social challenges at stakes. And that's very important, because actually the biggest problems in the world are the biggest business opportunities, like Peter Diamandis said. And behind those social challenges, the SDGs, there are a lot of business opportunities. Discover that, then designing the value proposition, the innovative solutions that can address that challenge. Define your economic model, and then develop your first prototype. That's what we do with a lot of companies, helping them to innovate with a positive impact on the society and environment. One example is that you might know, I guess, the business model canvas. Well, we created the impact model canvas, so we change every tools and techniques to make sure that they consider the positive impact into their the way they develop solutions. Last but not least, once you have the vision and strategy, the competencies, your culture, you can work on actions, and that's when we do sustainable innovation. When you look at design thinking, what is important is that a solutions, an innovation, well, a solution is innovative when, and only when, it's desirable, viable, and feasible. So basically, when there is attraction for the end users, there's a value proposition, that's the desirability. When it's executable, you can implement the solution very easily, it's feasible. And when there is a scalable economic model, and that's the viability. We brought the idea of sustainability. It needs to have a positive impact on the society. And that's sustainable innovation. And you cannot always be able as a company to manage and meet all those criteria. That's why it's very important to open your innovation process, invite the right stakeholders and work together with them. Some social innovators have the capacity to create a solution that is desirable, that really create a lot of value proposition on the market. But where they struggle, and believe me, I've talked with a lot of change makers, where they struggle is sometimes to create an economic model, to make sure that there is a business model behind. And as a company, you have a lot of know-how with that. Working with a lot of innovation or tech agencies or whatever will help you to have some feasibility, and working with experts in circular economy, in education, in health, or whatever, will help you to work on the sustainability aspect. So mixing the different stakeholders will enable you to create new innovative solutions that are sustainable and that address the most social pressing challenges. And then you have impact. Of course, always you need to measure, but then you have impact. Just to give you some example of collaboration that we saw on the market with our partners from the Shift. The city of Antwerp, they have a lot of cars, and people working for the city don't use the cars on a regular basis. Sometimes they just stop using it. Well, by collaborating with Cambio and using the system of Cambio, they enable to put every cars accessible for people, citizens of Antwerp, who need the cars for free. Kind of quick win partnership, but that's how you come with new solutions that actually address some big challenges, and we know how mobility is a challenge for Belgium. Another one we like, the Babylon beer from the Brussels Beer Project. Well, it's made by flour that has been transformed from some breads freshly baked by Deleuze, and the tons of bread that Deleuze threw away, which is a waste, become a new resource to create the Babylon beer. That's circular economy. That's basically how different partners who don't used to work together invent new solutions. Well, of course, the beer will not solve all social and environmental challenges, but you see how collaboration, how ecosystem can be very much more collaborative. One of the example, a case we like to mention is the one with Cisco. Cisco is one of our big clients, and we work with them for more than 1 year now. Basically, what we did with them was to identify the different challenge people into the organization that wanted to get involved in this new transformation program. And we invited them to first live a kind of immersive experience where during a 3 days hackathon, a 3 days innovation program, they needed to collaborate with an NGO and developed solutions to help that NGOs in their social missions. It was the first kind of 3 days hackathon where they were in competition with 7 other companies. So we worked with AXA, Bristol Myers Squibb, Bpos Bank, a lot of companies who all sent the 10 innovation champions into a one first immersive experience working with 7 other NGOs. That was the very first step. Why? Because people need to live the experience as a participant in a hackathon, in an innovation program, to discover that within 3 days they are able to build a solution for one of the biggest challenges in the world, let's say. Only then we took all those champions from Cisco and we trained them. We did a kind of train the trainer where we shared all the skills, all the techniques that you need to know to facilitate those kind of innovation programs. So the collective intelligence process, the innovation methodologies, they learned everything so that they were able at the end to facilitate their own programs within the Cisco environment. They've done that with their own clients, and it created a lot of business innovation and a lot of business opportunities for them. What is great is that after 1 year of support, creating a kind of new innovation unit into the organization, they asked us to do it again, to have again 10 innovation champions. We did that, and as a first immersive experience again, they should go to a cross-companies competition where they work with NGOs. They didn't do that. They told us, we are going to take that concept, bring that into our own environment. They now work on the CSR priorities. They invited every partners, resellers, a bit like Odoo actually. They invited every partners to work with them on the biggest social challenges and NGOs. So they own our concept, which is beautiful because now we see that we breathe the changemaker mindset into the company. So they work on that with their own partners to help NGOs and help themselves working on the biggest social challenges that they have selected. And they invite their own partners and resellers to do the same journey with us so that it bring that change maker mindset into their own company. So it's very good for us. But you see how actually it took quite a long time to bring that. And for us, it's very important because companies, and especially the largest companies, have to do something if we want to save the planet, basically. And that's why we focused on the larger companies. And here what we see is that they actually open the innovation process. They work with other external stakeholders, NGOs, partners, clients, and all together, whatever the type of structure and the business mission, whatever, they work together on big social challenges. The very first immersive experience we did with Cisco, they worked with a company that you might know, which is called Champignons de Bruxelles. You know them? Someone in them? All right. What they do is that they take the marc de café, so basically all the waste of the coffee that you put away, they took that and they used that to grow some mushrooms. Very nice company, we talk about them a lot in Brussels, in Belgium, and we put them together with Cisco. One of the challenges for them was to actually track the production process and automize the whole way they can track that. While Cisco have a lot of technologies, hardware, software, and they help them to define and to develop a solutions. A few weeks or months after this first immersive experience, they also worked with another company based in Louvain-la-Neuve, which is incredible company. Maybe you heard about that. Basically, they go in large, how do you say that? A location with a lot of companies, zoning. They go in different places and they created new activities like zero-waste activities, growing, sharing vegetables, a lot of activities that where employees can go and do kind of social team building and go there and understand, leave their job and just during the lunchtime discover those kind of new activities. Cisco worked with incredible company, with the Champignon Bruxelles, and together they try to define a new way at the game in Cisco to create a new atmosphere with the different clients, and working on the fact that with the technology of Cisco, they can automatize the whole production process of Champignon Bruxelles. An incredible company can invite the different companies to do a kind of social team building and understand how it works. So you see how different stakeholders together create a new type of initiative of business that can actually have an impact on the business, an economic impact, but as well as a social impact. In most of the discussion I have with different stakeholders of the ecosystem in Belgium, a lot of people are wondering what will be the 4.0. You know, the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, looking at the web, what is the 4.0? So, passive users, active users, interactive users. What is the 4.0? Does someone know? How would you? Connected users, indeed. Collaborative users. Now you have connected device. You have a lot of new device, new human, new things in the systems, so that people can actually collaborate. Device can collaborate, and that's what we think will be the next stage, to have collaborative and connected users. Indeed, we think that looking at the stories I told you, we'll have a mix between what is corporate venturing, meaning we work with other startups and together we create a joint venture, and impact investing. In between, what we like to call corporate impact in venturing could be the 4.0, and we are trying to recommend that to our clients, and we are still struggling to make them understand that's the way we need to do tomorrow. We need to bring those social innovators who have wonderful solutions for all social challenges, but struggle to make them scaled and have a big impact. Put them with corporate organization, bring maybe some impact investors, potentially public institution, while all together create new kind of joint ventures, impact-driven joint ventures, with some corporate organization that through the know-how, through the large customer base, can help those solutions to have a much bigger impact. And so that's why today I've been working on a startup acceleration program to understand how startups work. I co-founded the Impact Investment company, which is a cooperative that you can all join, by the way, which is called Citizen Fund. And we launched Impact Valley, which is a sustainable innovation agency. And together with my team, we are on a kind of experimental journey where we test those new way of working, those new ecosystem, and hopefully we'll create one day a first corporate impact venture. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions, because we still have some time. Yes? So the question was if there are other kind of impact corporate venture somewhere else in the world. Concrete example. Yeah, well, we haven't seen a lot of concrete example. And by the way, because we are now launching our activity report, and we have been interviewing a few people working on that for years. And the thing is that we don't have a lot of case, and definitely not case of impact that can be measured, because it's too soon. But we see as kind of, let's say, joint venture example, what is called a social impact bond, which is already in a lot of countries, which arrived in Belgium a few years ago. And basically the idea here is that social innovators need some investment. They have impact investors who put money into the organization, and as long as they achieve the selected defined KPI, public institution, government reimbursed the impact investors. That's a new form of kind of collaboration, and it worked. It has a lot of impact. I'm not fully convinced that's the way it should be done, because we address the social challenges that actually the government should also address. And I'm not fully sure that impact investors have the same knowledge and way to define KPIs than social innovators. Anyway, it's already a very good approach, and let's hope it will have some good example that we can leverage. But at least social impact bond works a lot in UK, and there are a few examples. I'm not fully aware of them. Yes? And what type of agencies? You know? Yeah. So the way you can work between actually basically two different companies, an agency and your clients, two different organizations. One of the way we did that is to actually identify the SDGs that they both want to act on it. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. If you go a bit further on the different actions, if one company want to work on them, another one even much smaller, well, together, if they have the same common objectives, well, they can work together and have, through open innovation methodology, they can, from the understanding of the challenge until the ideation process, they can very rapidly create solutions. Any further questions? Yes.
We've achieved a first win is
Yeah, I don't have the figures in mind, but there were studies saying that, well, pretty much most of your employees and most of your clients are actually looking and expecting some purpose-driven initiative. And the companies that are acting on this social transition will be the companies that will survive tomorrow. It's just like digital. That's the way we see it. If they don't change, they will die tomorrow, for sure. Yes. Yeah, I do agree. No more questions? 10 minutes of questions. Yeah, well, actually, and that's why we have one of our main challenge is the sales life cycle, because it takes quite a long time to convince C-level to do something, because we work with usually the highest position, because we need to convince them. So, well, the first thing is to get in touch with them. When you have like 33 years old, it's not that easy. Well, we have our network, and step by step, we get to know the boards of the companies. And indeed, you need to inspire them, make sure that you raise awareness. And the very first thing that we do is that we actually focus on innovation, because that's when they listen. Because we tell them that we will have a return on investment. You will have people who will be trained at the end. You will have new ways of working, breaking the silos again. You will have return on investment. But more than that, we will make sure that you will also have a positive image and potentially a real impact on the society. So that's the first thing. Indeed, is kind of awareness and inspiration. And exactly like you said, we listen to the problems, to the challenge. Ideally, they have identified them through the SDGs, but if not, we help them to do that. And sometimes we do that through workshop, co-create. So with the different managers, we actually help them to define the vision and the strategy through collective intelligence programs. And only then we invite them to identify the few people who want to be part of that new kind of CSR innovation unit. And then we do the whole journey, as I mentioned before. That's for like 3-4 big companies we work with, but in most of the case, they just call us to facilitate innovation programs. And it's like a 3 days facilitation, and then we kind of one-shot event. But we see more and more that it's always coming from CSR or sustainability managers, or coming from the C-level. So we see that mindset is actually changing also. So happy to get in touch with your clients anyway, for sure. No more questions? All right, thank you. Thanks a lot.
everyone. My name's Dave Nelson, and I'm here to share with you today an idea called story selling. Before I get started, I'd like to thank you for coming and spending time with me, and the folks at Odoo, and also Julie for letting me use her notebook so that you can see what it is that I'm presenting. What I plan on covering is I'll give you a brief introduction to who I am. I'll talk about why you might want to use story in your sales presentations. Using story to sell the dream, which is what we all in sales want to do. I'll talk to you about what I call the ACEs approach, and then I'll go through some conclusions. So to start with, a little bit of background about me. I've been selling systems for about 30 years. Typically, it was in the automotive retail sector. Anything that you would use to run an automobile dealership, I sold. That would be CRM, ERP, document management, and some very specialized tools that would integrate with different manufacturer systems. Before that, I was a home builder. And at one point in my life, where the idea of story comes from, was I was in 8th grade given an assignment, and maybe you were all given the same assignment, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And for me, I wanted to be a football player more than anything in the world. And if you go and you Google me and you say, oh, how many national championships did David Nelson win to bring glory to his school? The answer is none. I learned early on, this guy here was roughly 1.5 meters tall and about 52 kilograms. I was not an imposing force. So I wound up saying, I have to do something else in life. And I put the football down and took up other endeavors. And I was always intrigued with the idea of stories. And story wound up becoming important to me in the sales process a little bit later on in life. So the question then becomes, why use stories? Well, you can look and say, having had 30 plus years of experience selling, I have a pretty good idea, but you don't have to take my word for it. There's other things out there that will tell you. eMarketer last year recorded that in 2018, there were $628 billion spent on advertising. And advertising largely is storytelling. You will say, well, that's not all storytelling. Okay, some portion of that, hundreds of millions of euros, pounds, whatever dollar, whatever currency you want to use, is spent by corporations to tell stories. They must be working. And if you don't like corporations, how about academics? Academics have done a huge amount of research on the use of stories. And this is a quote that I really like. The important fact of human existence is that we use stories to organize and make sense of reality. That's pretty powerful. And if you don't like my experience, corporate greed, academics, do your own research. It's out there. So you might be saying, well, great, storytelling, I get it. What about story selling? What's the difference? Well, there's essentially one distinction between the two. And with the story, if you're just telling stories, what you're after is usually getting some sort of sense of emotion out there. You know, you want to leave the reader with something, was I happy, sad, this make me feel something. That's ultimately what storytelling is about. Story selling is about having an objective that you're trying to help somebody achieve something, and you want to have a next step that occurs. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're telling a story to get a contract signed. It may be that I want to move to the next step. I want to move the conversation along. And Julie actually had some really good points that I am in total agreement with in her previous presentation, where she was talking about sales needs to listen. And you'll see that that comes up in a little bit as well. And that it's not about, even though you're given the tools of how to help people make decisions and sort of help them get over the chasm of pain and fear and doubt, it's really about helping customers. That should really be your focus. So selling the dream. Selling the dream, you might think, well, why should you have to sell somebody on a dream? Usually it's because there's pain involved or there's some obstacle. And the object of the salesperson, from my perspective, is to help somebody get over whatever that obstacle is. And there will be pain involved with that, and that's usually why there's hesitancy there. And this is probably the image that is conjured up when I would walk into a competitive systems customer and I would say, I'm with so-and-so. That was a lot of times the face I saw. Not directly, but I could see in their eyes like a sheer terror of, oh, this guy's going to change my world. I mean, think about it. If you got a message today that said, starting on Monday, we're going to have a new email client, we're going to have a new operating system, we're going to have new software, all your experience that you built up is gone, wasted. I mean, you can understand this sense of terror. The answer is, that's the short run. In the long run, we love change, and I can prove it to you. For example, we all got here somehow. I happen to live in Austin, Texas, so just hopping on a train and riding here wasn't an option. I could get in my car, drive to an airport, drive to a port, catch a ship, catch a plane. I had lots of different options available to me. And it took me roughly 18 hours to get here, from Austin, Texas to Gembloux. And you obviously made the same similar calculations on how to get here. Different scenarios because you're from different places, but the situation was the same. So you might be thinking, well, that's great, so what? Well, the so what is that if you were to go back in time to my grandfather's day, and let's say he were giving this talk when he was a young man, the airplane didn't exist. That changes things. The automobile didn't exist. That also changes things. His options were significantly limited. He could catch a ride on a carriage, he could walk to a train station, go to a port. It would probably take him weeks to get here. I think we can all agree that taking weeks and probably costing more in terms of relative currency is not a good situation. So things have improved. But you're thinking, yeah, that's a distant experience, that doesn't really relate to me today. Well, I can tell you from a personal experience, one for mine, cell phone technology is amazing. How many of you have had to stand in a payphone when it's 100 degrees or 41 degrees outside, experiencing what it's like to make a phone call to confirm an appointment with somebody while the sweat's dripping down your chest while you're in a suit and a tie waiting to go on a sales call? That is not a fun experience. I'd much rather sitting in my air-conditioned car with the Bluetooth technology where I just click a button and talk to the guy. That's awesome. And again, you might be thinking, well, that's awfully old. I don't even know what a phone booth is. How many of you can imagine a world without the internet? How many of you use Google today or a search engine today? Probably all of you. So I think you would agree then that change in the long run is good. We've all benefited from change. So the question is, you have to get somebody over that hump of fear of change. And that's what sales' job is. And it's not about trying to trick somebody. It's not about trying to coerce them. It's about they have a business problem that they need to resolve. And you need to help them. You need to understand their story and how to get that story and tell them back to them about, here's your story today. And I'm used to moving around, sorry. And here's your story in the future. And explaining what the cost is going to be, not just in money, but in terms of pain and suffering. They need to be clear on that so that when that happens, you can have that conversation, which is, remember I said this was going to be here. It's going to be short-lived, and it will help you get past it. And that's what the story is about. Which brings me to the concept of ACEs. And ACEs I was thinking about my world, and my world was very different from a lot of the people that I was talking with at Odoo about how they sell. And they're involved with multiple opportunities in a month. They're looking at maybe 150 to 200 opportunities a month. I was looking at about 36 to 43 what I would consider major opportunities annually. My opportunities were very large, they were very expensive, and they involved wholesale change. And so I was thinking, well, how can I take some of those things that applied in my world and put them in a world where there's a much higher volume situation. And that's why I came up with this idea that I call ACEs, which is ask and clarify, entertain and summarize. And essentially, it's two steps if you were to look at it. The ask and clarify is what we would refer to as discovery, which is understanding what your prospect's situation is today, where they want to be, and then that's the first part. And the second part is the presentation and summarizing that presentation. And part of the summarization, in my opinion, if you do it well, is a natural close. You don't have to really, twist any arms or anything. It just naturally flows. So in the ask area, the idea is to get what their story is and what in that story is important to them. And in a simple question, or a series of questions like this might be, tell me what a day in the life is like of a person that's going to use your product. And it may be that they have multiple people that are using it or multiple roles. And you need to know what a day in the life of each of those people is like. For example, in my world, if it were a service advisor, what do they spend their day doing? How do they, when a customer comes in on the drive, what's the situation? You need to understand all that, because and then you need to figure out where the pain is. That's where you're drilling down and getting the information of, this is where they are today, and here are the problems that they're trying to overcome. It's not a bad idea as well to qualify some things depending on your situation. I think if you're dealing in an extremely high volume situation, qualifying on time frame, decision process, and price are critical, just because you don't want to waste their time, and you obviously don't want to have your time wasted either. It's a benefit to both. Qualification is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And then it's not a bad idea to understand competitive landscape. Are they looking at other solutions? What do they like about their solutions? Because maybe there's things that you can do where you do things differently, and it's good to have that conversation. With Clarify, what I like to do with Clarify is, once they've told you the things, before you go, you're getting ready to do a presentation at some point in the future. And what I like to do is focus on three things. You can't solve all their problems in one sitting. You've got to basically distill it down to, what can I accomplish in the short term, what are long-term goals, and what are mid-range goals. And so I would also want to know, of those three things, how do they measure it? Is it quantifiable? And for example, if I was talking with a vehicle sales manager, maybe his goal was, I'm selling 100 units today, and I want to sell 120 units next year. Well, that's a 20% increase. That's not going to come through organic growth normally. So the question then becomes, have you tried to do this before? Yeah? What happened? Because if they're likely to have the same problems if they don't change something. Einstein's, theory of insanity was doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It just doesn't work. You've got to focus on that. And so the other thing is that with that 20 units, it's good to understand what the impact of that is. So for example, if their gross profit is $1,000 a unit, this has this much benefit to you in qualifying that, because then when it gets to the point of where in some environments where you're talking about, hey, I've got a large consulting package, the reason that you're going to spend that money on a large consulting agreement is because it's going to get you this value. And that $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year, and then depending on, in our world, everything was looked at in 60-month business cycles. It gets significant quickly. It's also not a bad idea to understand if there's deal killers or not. I had a customer once who said, no cloud, I don't want any cloud. I want everything on site. I don't touch my data leaving the site. Well, if all you sell is a cloud solution, there's no point in spending any more time with them, other than maybe to help them understand where they might be able to, it's a good idea. I always like to, if I couldn't help them with the solution, I wanted to point them in the right direction to get them the solution. Because what I would tell my customers was, I always wanted to be the first phone call. No matter what, if you've got a problem, call me. And that's how I made my money. And I always like to get quotes and permission to use them. If somebody says, wow, you know, this would be X for me, so well, in my presentation, can I quote you on that? And a lot of times they will say yes, not a problem. But sometimes they may be in a slightly different position and you have to, you know, protect them. You don't want to run the bus over them. And that's basically the first step. You've gotten all this information and you're getting ready to roll into presentation. And where the idea of story selling came from was I had gotten a huge amount of information. I was working with a dealer group in western Kansas, and I got financial statements, management reports, every type of data you can get, quotes. I did workflow analysis of every person that was in the operation, and I had so much information, I couldn't think of a way to convey the message easily to the customer. And what I did was, in the evening I was working on it and I had an epiphany. I started realizing that these guys were all huge basketball fans and they just loved basketball. And so what I realized was there are 5 profit centers in a dealership. There's new vehicle sales, used vehicle sales, finance and insurance, parts and service. There's 5 guys on a basketball court. And guess what their big issue was? Talked about it a little bit earlier, communication silos, where the data wasn't flowing, there was breakdowns of communication. Well, guess what happens on a basketball floor if you don't communicate? Passes get lost, the ball gets dropped, bad things happen, you don't score points, you lose the game. This resonated so soundly with these guys that they were like, I get it. I didn't need all the data, I didn't need all the other stuff. That little story closed the deal. And that sort of set me on this path. So with the entertainment portion, it's important to understand what the story is that you can share with an individual that's going to have resonance and meaning. And it's also important to understand what if you can, and again, if you're turning the volume that a lot of these guys are turning, it's important to understand what that person's personality profile is. Because people receive information and take it in different ways. Different behaviors. Have you ever had that feeling where you're telling somebody something and they're just not clicking, they're not getting it? It's just, a lot of times it's you're presenting the information in a way that they're not receiving it. It's really that simple. And I mentioned when I was talking with the guys from Odoo the other day that there's a site, if you've ever been curious about personality profiles, it's Crystal Knows, crystalknows.com. You can get a free personality profile. And it can be very enlightening. It'll tell you, for this type of person, you want to communicate this way. For this type of person, you want to communicate this way. At any rate, so when you're giving the engagement with the entertainment, where you're selling the dream, where you're saying, this is where you are today, this is where you want to be in the future, you tell their story. And what I always like to do is I like to have a name of a person that was in that role. And I'd say, Tom, this guy does this today. And here's the things that really aggravate him. And here's where he's wasting huge amounts of time. And if you could just tweak this way, it would save that time. The problem is your system can't do that today. There's nothing that you can do that will help that. Here's something that will alleviate that. And that would be a recommendation that we would make. And then I would tell Tom's story in the demo. Here's why this is what it is. And you go through, and then at the end of each of those items, because typically you're going to hit on those 3 things, at the end of each one, I'd confirm that we were able to resolve that with the demo that we gave them on that particular item. And that's how you overcome the fear of change. And then ultimately, if you've confirmed the impact and resolution of each one, question I'd like to ask right at the end of the confirm is there anything, if you love what you see today, is there anything that I'm missing that would keep, what would the next steps be if you love what you see? And the reason that that's a powerful one is that's going to basically, they're going to tell you, hey, I got to talk to my boss. Well, that's a qualifier that you missed. Hey, we're not going to do this for 24 months. That's a qualifier that you missed. My budget is $110. You know, that's a qualifier that I missed. And then what's nice if you've done that up front is that when you get to the summarize point, you basically say, you know, if we missed anything, is there anything that we've discussed that we haven't hit on? And then I come back to this when we talked. Remember last time I said, if you love it, you see what happens next, and you said this? Guess what? You're there. It's like, this is the time where you just basically either just say, depending on the cultural norm or the client or the behavior of the person, you either A, say, here's the contract, sign it if that's what you need to do, or you just say, what's next? Whatever works for that particular personality, and you close. And that's really pretty much it. In my world, what would typically happen was I would explain what the implementation process was like. Say, hey, once we get a contract, the contract takes roughly 4 weeks to get approved. We have a 4-month backlog and starting implementation. So if you make a decision today, you know, you won't see anything happening visibly. You know, we won't show up at your place of business for 4.5 months. And then you'd start hearing the questions of, well, we really hoped that it would happen at X date. Well, then we need to do this right now. There's no waiting. So that's the idea there. So to sort of summarize, looking back on my career, 30 years in direct system sales, 40 years in general, what I've learned is it's really about connecting with people. Sales is not this specific, you know, great. It's really about, do you connect with people? Do you build trust? Do they, when you spend time with them, do they listen to you and value you? And if you don't, I don't care how good a salesman, you're not going to get the business. And that's sort of my takeaway. And then you might be wondering, why does this knucklehead have a game ball here? Well, game ball is a concept in the state, and I asked, I had a Czech student who lived with us for a year, and I asked him, I said, is there the equivalent in soccer of game ball in soccer? He's like, not really. And what game ball is that if you do something, an individual or a group of people, you do something that's amazing, that helps the entire team win, typically what they'll do is after the game, they give you the game ball. And what I'm doing is I'm going to give this ball, is the game ball, to the folks at Odoo. And what I'm hoping is that whoever comes up with the best story about how they move business forward, that they give this ball to that individual. I don't know who it is. You may say, well, what are the rules? What's this? No idea. That's the next story that's waiting to be told and written by you all. Thank you very much. If you'd like to ask questions, I have about a minute and a half for questions, I think. Questions, anyone? I think everybody is satisfied. And if you want to reach out to me some way, those are ways that you can reach me. Thank you very much for your time.
Are you still sexual?